I'm feeling wild today. My kids are all around. I haven't even finished this first cup of coffee and I'm thinking we're gonna make a video because we have to talk about unit studies. Hey, welcome back to the Commonplace. I'm Autumn. I'm your host of this video and also of the podcast, which we've gotten a little off course lately. I've been making video resources to go along with the principles as we are discussing Mason's full 20 principles on the podcast. And I think I left off around principle 8. So today, we're gonna catch up on 9 and 10. And if you don't know about 9 and 10, it's where Mason brings in a guy by name. His name is Herbart. He's a German philosopher, an educational philosopher. And she kind of gets in a mood with Herbart. And she makes fun, so it's not me making fun, it's Mason. She makes fun of unit studies. But this is a problem because there are a lot of unit studies that are called Charlotte Mason unit studies on the internet. You can buy them all over Instagram. Why is that? How do we know what we're supposed to be looking for? What are we supposed to do with these unit studies when Mason was anti-unit study? That's what we're gonna talk about today. So first, why doesn't Mason like the unit study? Well, there are a lot of reasons, but first, when she talks about Herbart, you need to know that Herbart believed that a child's soul was inactive. It was basically nothingness. He used the word soul for mind, and you hoped as a teacher to kind of like get ideas through the mind. You could never be sure what was gonna go in, if it was gonna stay. So your job as a teacher was to link these ideas together to form a chain so that the right ideas would stick in a child's brain at the right spot. It's crazy, it's wild. It's a mind bucket philosophy. Basically drop ideas in, hope for the best, and that makes you as the teacher really important. And the child, well, we're just hoping for the best. So obviously Mason didn't like this. She didn't like this because it wasn't true of how a child thinks, it wasn't true of how ideas change the mind and shape the inner thought life of a person, and she had a lot of problems. But when she got into unit studies, which she actually does rip into an entire unit studies idea based on Robinson Crusoe, the book, she says that this is something that makes the teacher feel good because you've done so much with so little. You've done a composition piece, you've done shipbuilding activity, you've done comprehension questions, you've used it for mathematics, you've talked about it for geography, you've used one book from every single possible angle in school. And that's basically what a unit study is. If you grew up like I did, going to public school in the 90s and 2000s, then you know that you could do a lot with one single book. But Mason says, while it will be entertaining for the child in the moment, they will hate the book and everything else brought in order to teach in that way. So when we look at unit studies, the things we need to be taking note of, because there could be a good way to do a Charlotte Mason unit study, but it's gonna have particular characteristics. So one of Mason's problems with a unit study was that it gave repeated exposure to the material. You would see the same passages over and over again, whether you were doing the math side of it, the geography side of it, the language arts side of it, you would see the same bits over and over again. We know that Mason likes a single reading, hearing, or viewing in order to maintain the habit of attention. If you know you're gonna see something multiple times, you know you don't really need to pay attention, right? So that was one of her concerns. The second was that the teacher was making the connections for the student. They were laying them right in front of them. And it's the mind making the connections that's the mind learning. The kids who are reading these books need to be the ones making the connections. So the third problem is that the way unit studies work usually does not teach children to engage with literature the right way. When you read something like Robinson Crusoe, you don't read it to learn how to build a ship. You don't read it to learn how to map the seas. Robinson Crusoe is a story about repentance and honoring your parents. And we want to make sure that we teach our children the right way to engage with literature so they come to stories and they learn and they understand the point of reading. Quick side note, if your children do want to make a ship when they read Robinson Crusoe, because obviously that's going to happen, that's a great thing to do in your free time. There is a difference between lesson time and free time. But back to the lesson time. So what are you looking for if you do find a Charlotte Mason unit study? How do you know if it's actually Charlotte Mason or if it's just pretty and uses nature and living books and so people assume it's Charlotte Mason? First thing, is there repeated exposure to the material? Or do you, through the course of a unit study, cover an entire book, not pieces of a book, an entire book or an entire idea, which is synthetic knowledge, not analytic knowledge. There's a whole podcast about that too. And does it allow a child to see it once and then move forward? That's gonna be the first thing you're looking for. The second thing you're gonna look for is make sure there are no comprehension questions, summary points, call out boxes with bullet points so the child can just take a quick fact without its informing idea. You're not gonna want that either. And thirdly, you're going to want to make sure that when the ideas are presented, they're given in a whole scope, that you're putting together a full picture of an idea for a student, not breaking it down analytically. Analytical thought is not bad. In fact, it's very needed in education, but it comes later after a child has first been introduced to the full idea. It's kind of like if you were building a house. You would never come and just look at piles of lumber, nails, screws, joists, beams. Do I know how to build a house? Clearly not. But you would never just come and look at that and be like, this is a house. Isn't it cool? Shouldn't we build them? No, you would go and you would take someone to a beautiful home so they could see the full picture of what a home is, because a home is more than the sum of its parts, right? And so then after you've fallen in love with that idea, you understand what you're actually talking about, then you can get into the detailed understanding of what those parts are and how they work together. Always start with synthetic knowledge. Oh, a child, another one. This is a wild time with 3 little ones upstairs playing. Who knows what they're doing? And then just like a final note, there really is a difference between lesson time and free time. It is very natural for your child to read Winnie the Pooh and think, I would like to have a tea party like Christopher Robin and his friends. That's not the point of Winnie the Pooh, of the stories, but if your child thinks that on their own, if they get there in their own way, it is perfectly fine. Wonderful. You should totally do it. You should say, yes, this afternoon after we finish our formal lessons, I would love to have a tea party with you. Or whatever it is. Children are free to make their own connections and actually find their own personal touches with the material they're engaging with. But when it comes to formal lessons, we are not trying to entertain a child. That's a big Mason problem with unit studies because it puts the teacher in the position of maintaining the child's attention. But we know that children are the only ones who can command their own attention. So the teacher, while we're very important, we're part of their education, we are not the magical mythical unicorn doing all of the work. The child has to do the work. So we're not trying to entertain them. We're not trying to distract them from actually engaging with ideas. We don't need to do too much more than narration and the end of lesson discussion. And we don't want to reduce our offering of the feast into bite-sized pieces we've connected for a child and laid before them like we're dropping it in a bucket. So when you come across a Charlotte Mason unit study, hopefully that helps you really understand if it is actually Charlotte Mason or if it's just a unit study with pretty pictures, because sometimes that happens too. I hope this was helpful. We're gonna keep working through the principles. I'm gonna keep coming back with more formal schooling for year 1 as well, don't worry. But I hope that helps, and if you have any questions, let me know below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.